This video is going to be about how I go about texturing river hexes. There are many different ways you can do this. This is just going to be the one I use. Feel free to do yours completely differently if you like. Here's two river hexes I made earlier. It's important if you're going to use the interlock mechanism that you do attach the cog or hex at the bottom of your hexes before you start this. With something like a grass hex you can get away with doing it afterwards. With river hex, particularly the products we're going to be using, definitely do it first. Otherwise you'll end up putting dents and things into your river surface when you're weighing it down. First thing we're going to need to do is seal the surface. Because we're using polystyrene, I don't know much about the chemistry of this, but if you try to put any kind of product on top of polystyrene, like a resin or anything like that really, which is going to just try and make a river effect, you're either going to find that it's going to affect the curing of that product, or you're going to get bubbles, sort of the gasification comes up through it, or you may even find that, depending on what your resin's made from, you might eat into the polystyrene. I haven't encountered that myself, but I'm sure there are some products which will do that, because lots of things, spray paints and so on, can the aerosol propellant can eat into polystyrene. So definitely seal it first. I have tried doing it with PVA glue, a white glue, perhaps mixed with paint, and I don't recommend that for, at least for the products I'll be using, which is it's called a Woodland Scenics, that's the company. Realistic water, because that product does, I've discovered, react with PVA glue. It'll form some quite nasty cracks. I'll show you later in this video. So the best thing I found is to use some filler. This is some ready-to-use filler, which you can buy cheaply. There's no, whether you get an expensive brand or cheap brand, I do not notice any real difference for this purpose. You want something a smooth filler, like a fine surface filler, not a really nothing that's too gritty or thick. A smooth one, and this should be ready to use straight from the pot because I've had this for a while. I've just added a few drops of water just to get it smooth again, and then what we're going to do is cover the surface completely. So this is going to cover over, importantly, if we have any holes from our bolts, but even if we don't, we want to get a full covering over the surface. And this is how we'll do it. So get yourself a tool. It doesn't have to be as small as this. This is just a sculpting tool that I have had. I use for a lot of things, as you've probably seen in my other videos. I'm sure you could do this with, I don't know, an old butter knife or something like that. You might find it faster with a bigger implement. You just try and spread it as smoothly as you can. Now, one of the problems with water in terrain is the scale of it. And if you ever watch any TV series from the Jerry Anderson series from the 60s and 70s, Thunderbirds and Stingray and those sort of things, one of the things that really gives away the scale is if they have water. I think in those shows they use real water with their miniatures. And it's a bit of a giveaway because water doesn't scale very well. And in modern films, if they do have miniatures, they tend, even if they have real miniatures, they would normally make the water computer generated. And thankfully that's something which has improved over the years. So CG water is pretty good these days. For miniature terrain, again, water will, to some extent, can determine the scale of your battlefield. And the thing that gives it away is any ripples, because the ripples and crests and waves and anything like that will very much tell you how big your terrain is, what the scale is. And for that reason, because I wanted my terrain to be suitable for multiple scales, in my case I my gaming is mostly 20 to 28 mil. So I do World War II 20 mil. I'll do some 15mm World War II, and fantasy I do the 25 or 28. So I want something that will work for both those scales, but especially if you want to do something like be able to use it for like a drastically different scale, like a naval wargaming scale, which is usually very small. You know, in order to get like a battle cruiser, be this sort of length. There's vast differences in scale, and if you have sort of stormy seas or waves and so on modelled onto it, it's going to give it away. So I made the decision to model mine this sort of smooth, flat, calm water, and that makes it less realistic in a way, particularly if it's going to be the sea. If it's like a lake or a pond, it's perfect. It's actually something they do that's often done on model railroading for a slightly different reason. Because with model railroading, you're basically always locking in your terrain scale because of the gauge of your railway. And the reason there's a theory that you should always make your water smooth in model railroads, because it's a bit weird that anytime you model waves onto terrain, it works in a photo because it's a snapshot in time, but those waves should be moving. And if you have a train that's moving around your terrain, it's just kind of weird to have the train train and carriages in motion whilst your water is frozen in time. There's not that much you can do about that other than making your water calm will hide that so much. Of course, if you've got anything like waterfalls or rapids, there's nothing you can do about that. But we don't have quite that problem in wargaming, if that's the purpose you're using your hexes for. Imagination will fill in a lot of gaps. But yeah, that's why I decided to have no ripples on my water. There are some great tutorials out there if you do want to have a look at what's possible for putting ripples in water. And it will make your water look more realistic, I think. Or more realistic if you want to have it to be waves and the sea. But my objectives were make it suitable for multiple scales and multiple purposes. So one of the problems if you put waves onto your terrain, like say for instance you were having an approach to a beach, perhaps for D-Day landings or something like that, then the waves are very much oriented to the direction of the beach. The waves are going to be coming out onto the beach. What you don't want is some waves going towards the beach and some going sideways on potentially adjacent hexes. And because I want to be able to rotate these hexes any way I want and have them work, you really want a neutral. The same way you want your grass to be fairly uniform. You also, perhaps even more so, you want your water to be uniform. And having a smooth surface lets you do that. So if you are going to put model waves or crests or anything onto your terrain, I would recommend that you would do it in a non-directional way. Except perhaps next to if you've got a shore piece like this as opposed to a completely flat river section, it's perfectly legitimate to have something coming from the shore, Perhaps you want to model something to show that the water is shallow here, that's a change of colour, or some ripples coming from the edge. I think that's legitimate because this will always be a shoreline wherever you put it. But out towards the edge here, or on a completely flat one, you don't really want a direction to it because it's going to limit how versatile and modular your river hexes are. And modular hex terrain is all about getting maximum reuse and maximum modularity from your hexes. So that's a lot of talking whilst I've been covering these hexes. So I'm just making sure I'm getting the full coverage first, and then I'll have a little pass afterwards to try and smooth out any tooling marks. So it seems I've mixed only just enough for this purpose. Okay, so that should be enough on there. But make sure we get right the way to the edges. And then erase the marks. Now you can wet your palette knife. You don't always need to, but if you do, you want to get the absolute minimum amount of water, like almost like run it across a damp tissue. Because the stuff, before it's set, is is water soluble. So a very small amount of water will help smooth it off, but too much will just liquefy this, and you have a right mess in your hands. Okay, almost done, I think. You can come back and sand this, as you know, because this stuff is designed for filling holes in your walls and so on. You can come back and sand it afterwards. Obviously, the smoother you can get it first, the less you'll need to do that. And you definitely don't want anything big, any big imperfections. Okay, I think that'll do for this stage. So I'll come back to this later.